or less
No,
than
don't do this.
Golgogmoth?
Well, they're both going to make me goal gag, so let's just not mention either of them.
Well played. Both players on a 6-card hand here. Oftentimes when both players mulligan, you start to look into the question, who benefits more from a double mulligan? You feel like Azorius controls kind of advantage. Does that get a little bit more so here?
For the most part, as long as Mogelgaard actually has some of the more important tools, I think it'll be fine. There are a lot of cards that aren't super relevant. These are going to be some of the more anti-control cards. And there are cards like Supreme Verdict that are just so much more important than everything else in the deck that they will make up a mulligan to even 4 or 5 by themselves.
Couple islands to start for Mogelgaard. We see Werning shocking to cast Land War Elves on turn 1 and shocking again on turn 2 to 16. Just going to cast a Lovestruck Beast. Get this 5/5 on the table.
And this is a kind of card that opens you up to some really rough plays. If we just see Mogelgaard answer this Elvish Mystic. That's a way to answer Lovestruck Beast without actually committing a card to answering the Lovestruck Beast.
Right, it can't attack unless you have a 1/1. Field of Ruin is land number 3 for Mogelgaard, so no white mana immediately, but he can go find a plains by destroying one of these tombs.
Just give it a second. This never happens.
All right, see how much additional pressure Werning can apply. He'll start by attacking for 5 with the Beast, Mogelgaard to 15.
Modern Classic players, that is time in a round.
Looks like a lot of spells in Werning's hand. That's a good sign.
Right, this is a spot where Werning just wants to actually make sure he doesn't run out of gas, because most of these cards are going to deal damage at some point.
Second Lovestruck Beast. No land, so it's just all spells. So you see Sinister Sabotage is going to catch that. And
so
it's
that's
actually
concerning for me.
And it surveils away as Sinister Sabotage as well.
So that sort of communicates to me that Mogelgaard doesn't have much. It didn't have a Supreme Verdict, was missing other white sources or so on. And that's a rough spot to be.
He does get a couple things going in his favor on turn 4. Draws, plays Glacial Fortress, lets him use it to very Time Raveler to bounce the Beast. Elvish Mystic finishes off with Teferi, but Werning only redeploys Scavenging Ooze here, not the Lovestruck Beast, so still missing that 3rd mana outside of the Elf. There's a Plains, though, and here is Elspeth. That's going to be Elspeth's son's nemesis for Mogelgaard. Couple 1/1 blockers coming off, the -2.
Prepared to not take much damage for a while.
That one does a good job of making some chump blockers. It can gain some life, and also pretty importantly, it can come back later by escaping for 6 mana.
Right, there's even a point where if you have enough cards in your graveyard, you can just spend 6 mana every other turn to make 2 1/1s and gain 5 life.
Here's a Rotting Regisaur for Werning. Looks like no 3rd land again. Scavenging Ooze is going to attack. Gets chump blocked by a token.
And we see there Werning trying to incentivize Mogelgaard to double block the Scavenging Ooze. That's Werning recognizing that card isn't going to do much here, and he needs to do something to pave the way for this Regisaur.
Regisaur is a little bit interesting over Lovestruck Beast, as Mogelgaard gets to make a couple more tokens on this turn.
I would assume this means Werning has a Great Henge in his hand, and he wants all of... One, it's a mana source, which he is kind of desperate for at the moment, and it staples an additional card on the rest of his creatures for the rest of the game.
Yeah, it makes sense. If you can get a Great Henge to resolve, it is just huge. It's pretty easily, I think, his best card in the matchup.
Oh, absolutely, and this really feels like a pocket for Werning, where if you don't get to do it now, you run the risk of just never actually forcing Mogelgaard to tap low enough to make it resolve from here.
Mogelgaard's going to use a Field of Ruin to go for 1 over her own tomb.
Two-headed giant players.
Goes and finds a Plains.
Have been posted.
Elspeth's going to go to 1 and make 2 tokens. Mogelgaard's just been making his land drops at this point. Now his mana is actually looking really good. It was a little bit tight on turns 2 and 3. But good spread of white and blue mana at this point.
Amazing what 3 additional lands can do.
Right. Wasn't just the volume, it was also the type. That Glacial Fortress did show up just kind of on time. And back to Shaun Werning. Now he will discard a card to Rotting Regisaur. It's going to be a Rishkar. And a Cast Out in the upkeep. That's going to go for the Regisaur.
Oh, and I love this sequence. It never gives Werning the chance to actually commit that Great Henge to the battlefield.
Yeah, pretty solid there. If you say, for example, if you let the Great Henge resolve and then it casts a creature, immediately Werning would draw a card is the concern.
Exactly. And, I mean, it's just on the battlefield at that point, whereas now Werning can't even cast it.
And we'll see what Werning can do. He has not made a third land drop this yet. He's had 3 mana because of Elvish Physics since turn 2, but that's been the total mana he's had, and he's kind of flush with 3 drops. We know he has a Lovestruck Beast in hand. See him attack with Scavenging Ooze, and Mogelgaard is just going to block that with one of those tokens. And here is Lovestruck Beast. It's back. And a pass to Mogelgaard.
I don't know if you've ever seen Beauty and the Beast, but I assume the Beast is a loyal fella. Makes sense it'd be back for more.
Back over to Mogelgaard. I do spot Supreme Verdict in hand.
Oh, yeah, and you can tell Mogelgaard is trying to use that to slam the door shut rather than simply using it as a value piece.
Elspeth's going to pump those tokens and then just escape right back onto the battlefield. I love this. Kind of selling that he doesn't have Verdict. Getting aggressive. Passes turn after making 2 more tokens and playing Hallowed Fountain tapped.
How many Raise the Alarms can you beat, Werning? Is it 4?
And given the constraints on Werning's mana and Mogelgaard being light on cards in hand, I really like trying to get the most you possibly can out of the Verdict. And also because of the Scavenging Ooze, I like that Mogelgaard just really aggressively escaped the Elspeth while he made sure he had the resources.
Right, and for now, Werning is taxed on mana, but if you're planning on playing a long game, you can assume Werning's going to find more lands in the meantime, which just translates to more Ooze activations to kind of just fill out the curve.
Lovestruck Beast and Scavenging Ooze make an attack. They're both chump blocked once again, and Rotting Regisaur will join the party. Is this worth a Supreme Verdict? Well, Mogelgaard started with an attack, and we haven't seen him do that yet. 1 block, 1 damage, warning to 15.
Call that the Hornet Sting.
And there's Supreme Verdict. Get that stuff out of there. 2 more tokens made by the Elspeth.
These standings will be final in 5 minutes.
And then Field of Ruins going to take care of Overgrown Tomb here.
Single file line in front of your scorekeeper.
Mogelgaard finds Island.
To claim your prizes.
Werning finds Forest.
And heads up sequencing from Werning here, because deck lists are face up, Mogelgaard actually knows that Werning doesn't have any swamps in the deck.
Could strand future Rotting Regisaurs.
Exactly.
Right, Werning is going to draw for turn. Right, there's a replacement Llanowar Elves, so he can get up to 3 mana again next turn, but
Basically a Dryad Arbor on this battlefield.
and Mogelgaard's going to draw. He got through a lot of creatures, but he's a bit light on resources. Cards in hand, pretty light. He's going to pump up his creatures with the Elspeth, attack for 6 with the tokens, warning to 9.
And, you know, ironically, we were kind of joking before, but Werning's just not going to run out of gas, and that's why we see Mogelgaard working harder to actually end the game here.
Right. Ooh, and you were saying that Mogelgaard's kind of stranding Werning on black mana. He just drew Rotting Regisaur.
That's to say he skipped his draw step.
Right. Some other 3 drops here. I believe Ronas at the front of the hand. And here's Rishkar Pima Renegade. That's a solid one. Kind of another mana source, which is useful. Pumps up the Rishkar and the Llanowar Elves. End step, Mogelgaard's going to cycle Irrigated Farmland. Finds Teferi, Hero of Dominaria.
The old door slammer.
Against a battlefield like this with a couple chump blockers already online, that is serious business.
Right.
Teferi is cast and plussed.
If you're in Werning's position, you can see the writing on the wall at this point. You really need something to break your way in order to get through this.
Right, back over to Werning. Finds a forest, so he has up to 5 mana this turn, but not Nothing really impacts the battlefield immediately when he casts it in his deck.
Right, and at the risk of being little ugly, he has 5 mana this turn, but it feels like the game's so far gone. Who cares?
Right. And you mentioned Mogelgaard sequencing very smartly around a possible Great Henge. That's the front card in Werning's hand.
Right, he's so close to just having a ton of dead cardboard in hand. We know the Rotting Regisaur, the Great Henge. I see a Ronus hiding out there. That can't even attack. A lot of these cards in the Golgaria aggro deck, it's not literally a synergy deck, but they do rely on each other to a point.
Here's a Scavenging Ooze from Werning. And it's just going to be another cast. He's going to cast the Ronus the Indomitable. Omen of the Sea in response from Mogelgaard.
Digging for that sensor.
Would be a good spot.
100 sensor.
One top, one bottom. Is it Censor? No. It's a card that he felt like keeping even in the face of Ronas. He's going to cast another Omen of the Sea. Keeps both on top. That is very scary.
Right, if you're in Warning's position, if this were a timed match, I might scoop him up at this point.
Teferi goes to 6. I think that my win percentage against opponent untapping with Hero of Dominaria is close to 0.
Yeah, it's pretty low. I'd say dozens of games that they have untapped with one, and I have won. Count on one hand.
Teferi's going to go to 6. An attack with the tokens, Werning to 8, and there is another Supreme Verdict. Ronas left behind, but unclear if it'll ever be able to attack. Back over to Werning. He needs to get back on the battlefield in a big way.
That would just let him dump his hand. Oh, not quite, not quite.
Doesn't have a second green is kind of the issue, right? Steel Leaf Champion. That's a creature that turns on Ferocious. It turns on the Ronus. It attacks Teferi, and there is a Azorius Charm.
This is one of the issues that you're going to see Werning running into in this matchup. Azorius Charm very frequently is just a card you cycle most of the time that maybe mops something up early, but even this late in the game, it's such an effective tool against what Werning's deck is trying to accomplish.
Ronus going to go on top of the library. Yeah, there's just so much. The deck has so much air with Land of War Elves, Avalanche Mystic. Werning's trying to get like one big creature online a lot of the time. And you don't want to overcommit to Supreme Verdict. And when you're not doing that, Charm just tags your one creature.
Exactly. This is not a matchup where you're going to have these creatures tax cards like Fatal Push, right? You're going to end up having to kind of commit into things like Supreme Verdict in a way that is not good for you.
Mogelgaard's going to do some scrying, keep some stuff on top, draws for turn, pluses his Teferi, casts the Time Raveler, bounces Steel Leaf Champion. A million cards in hand, Werning back down to no meaningful permanence on the battlefield. And Elspeth's going to escape again, and Werning's at 8. This actually closes pretty quickly.
Right, we got, what, 1, 2 turns?
2 tokens set up, Werning's going to draw that Ronus again. And it does not do really anything on its own. So cast a Steel Leaf Champion. Kind of a blocker.
Legal magic card.
Nothing wrong with this play. Hero of Dominaria goes to 8. Time Raveler goes to 2. Elspeth goes to 1. 2 more tokens on the battlefield. Here's a tapped Irrigation Ditch. Teferi untaps that. Sorry, Irrigated Farmland.
Not playing Tess. I know you've been comparing Pioneer to Extended a bunch, but unfortunately those days are over.
That was the first net deck I ever just bought. Irrigation Ditch Storm.
I feel so close to you sometimes because Second Sunrise Eggs was same era of Extended. Basically the first net deck I ever bought.
Nice. Steel Leaf Champion tries to attack. Azorius Charm says no thank you. Now, the first time I played the deck, I went off for Mind's Desire for 10 and hit 8 lands, and I never played it again. But I did buy it.
See, like I said, I just feel so close to you sometimes.
All right, Rona shows up, and so does Teferi Emblem.
Open competitors Kevin McCluskey.
Here's Feel the Rune. Time Raveler goes to 3. You see a sensor in Mogelgaard's hand. More like Vindicate. Elspeth's going to pump up the tokens, and they are just lethal. Shaun Mogelgaard shows many advantages of his deck over Shaun Werning's in Game 1.
This is actually pretty easily the worst matchup for Werning in top 8. This Golgari aggro deck is good against a specific subset of decks, and it's very good there, but it's quite polarizing in its matchups in that its other matchups are quite bad, and this is unfortunately one of those times.
Players going to sideboard here. Shaun Mogelgaard has 3 Mystical Disputes, 3 Ether Gust, 2 Dream Trawler, 2 Rest in Peace, a Narset Porter of Veils, a Baffling End, a Settle the Wreckage, a Gideon Ally of Zendikar, and a Monastery Mentor.
I just don't think Mogelgaard's really trying to mess with the formula too much here. We could see some things like Baffling End, Aether Gust, obviously quite nice against a deck that's pretty close to mono green. I think you could probably make a case for Dream Trawler. The sizing of Warning's creatures makes that a little bit sketchier. Settle the Wreckage, obviously quite nice against a deck that has to attack in order to win. But I think for the most part, we're going to just try to see Mogelgaard replicate what we just watched.
Sideboard for Shaun Werning, who needs some help. Let's see if he has it. He has 4 Leyline of the Void, 2 Golgari Charm, 2 Fatal Push, 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Windstorm, a Reclamation Sage, a Stain the Mind, and an Aethersphere Harvester.
And you know, I just don't think Werning has very many tools for this matchup in the sideboard, and I respect that, because how much of your sideboard do you think it would take to end up flipping a matchup like this that is just, you are so far behind on a fundamental level?
Right, you have a 15-card sideboard, you probably want about 30.
Yeah. So, yeah, Golgari Charm, pretty great because it can regenerate your creatures through a Supreme Verdict. It can even tag something like Cast Out in a pinch. Also gets soldier tokens out of the way with just the -1/-1 mode. Very versatile against Azorius decks historically. Thoughtseize, pretty good at picking apart some of the pieces that Mogelgaard's going to have. You know, say Mogelgaard takes a hand that leans on Verdict, you take it out, you can actually just kill Mogelgaard while he's rebuilding. But past that, I really don't like most of these options. You can make a case for Aethersphere Harvester because of how it can dodge a lot of the sweepers, but at that point, things are starting to feel pretty rough. I just think we could maybe see that over something like Ronus. That's pretty easy for the Azorius control deck to check most of the time.
Sure. We are 2 weeks out from our regional champions here on the SCG Tour. Those are going to be Modern on Saturday, March 7th, and we have a bunch of locations across the United States here. You see the options. I personally expect to be at Outpost 2000 and beyond in Minneapolis.
I'm not sure if I'm going to make it out to one, but I'm leaning towards going to one at this point. I'm not positive which one, but I really like Atomic Empire.
Okay, right on. But you see the options there, and if you want to play this tournament, I recommend pre-registering, and this is what you're playing for. We have cash prizes. First place gets $1,200, also 20 SCG points. Nothing to laugh at there. Top 8, all invited to the Invitational SCG Con Summer. That's a big deal. And if you were one of the first 200 players to pre-register at each location, you get this unique playmat and token. The 3 Fates.
There are so many Fates here.
At least 3.
Minimum.
The Fates are Toga, Building, and Hydra.
That one didn't land as well as the first one.
No, I mean, I'm just spitball. I got a couple of them we're workshopping. But if you want information on regionals, go to go.starcitygames.com/regionals. I think the correct formula is a mix of the 2 jokes, where I say the 3 Fates are Running, Screaming, and Hydra.
You know, I think the best artists just know when to leave their masterpieces.
I never claimed to be the best or even a good artist.
And the best never do.
Both players were on 6 in game number 1 as we shuffle up for the sideboard games. I think for Werning, it's very important to have a 7-card hand.
Right, so something I touched on a little bit in game that I think we saw in a big way is that a lot of these cards, even though it's not really a synergy deck and most of the cards stand on their own, things like the Great Henge, like Ronus, all of these cards kind of lean on other things working for the Golgari aggro deck for them to really have much of a text box, right? Ronus is not a card that can attack if it's the only thing on the battlefield. Werning is never even going to cast the Great Henge if there isn't something already going on. And as a result, Werning is going to struggle in these lower resource games.
Does get to be on the play this go-round, and he keeps. And Mogelgaard mulligans. That's what you want to see if you're Shaun Werning. Getting some updates from the back tables. Ben Weinberg does take down Jamison Purdue, so we are whittling away the non-inverter decks in the top 8.
I mean, that's just how inverter works, right?
Seems to be. We have a shot at 3 of the top 4 being inverter, and we have a guarantee that 2 of the top 4 will be inverter.
No big deal. Great narrative.
This is coming a couple weeks after a team open when 4 of the top 4 was inverter.
It's just a strong deck. You know, we kind of mentioned it previously that it's great that it can just attack from so many angles. It makes it great in these longer tournaments.
All right, Mogelgaard keeps on 6. Werning opens on Blooming Marsh, Llanowar Elves. Sorry, Elvish Mystic. Same deal. Mogelgaard plays an island, and here's a turn to Yorvo.
Pioneer Classic players Jacob Morrison and Derek Davis. Pioneer Classic players
Glacial Fortress on 2 for Mogelgaard, and back over to Shaun Werning.
judge area to the left of the event.
You see
Yorvo is exactly the kind of card that can capitalize on any stumbles from Mogelgaard. If it turns out that this mulligan is a big deal, then this is going to end the game fast.
Heart's Desire makes a Shaheen Sarani. Werning has the land to cast Lovestruck Beast. That gets censored. Yorvo attacks for 4.
And there's part of you that has to ask if the 1/1 was worth it.
Yeah, just playing into censor like that.
Right.
Now, if you're Werning, I think part of the calculation is you're trying to think of what Mogelgaard's sideboarding. I was actually kind of interested in it because historically, Elves was like the deck in Legacy I boarded Days out against. So I was wondering if it's like at its worst in this matchup. But I suppose it always just cycles.
Right, so there's a point where it's going to be a little bit awkward in a bunch of cases, naturally, but especially when you're on the draw against a deck that's just built around a bunch of 3-drops, it's a way for you to break serve if Werning doesn't have the perfect draw of turn 1 mana creature into 3-drop.
Fair enough. Yorvo tries to rumble again. It gets Azorius Charmed, and no follow-up for Werning as Mogelgaard puts the Teferi Time Raveler on 5.
Oh,
well, I said no follow-up. Oh, no. Oh, geez. So he has Collected Company, but he needed to respond to Teferi.
Oh.
That's
going to cost him.
Absolutely. And his deck is not built to play like these Teferi games, so not often a huge consideration for him, but yeah, Teferi putting him in the hurt locker here. It's a tapped Overgrown Tomb. Now, Werning could recommit that Yorvo. He could Collected Company here. But he wants to get back on the battlefield.
And here, basically, Werning is trying to weigh if he wants to company and only push 1 at the Teferi, which lets the Teferi still stick around if it then bounces something after that, or if you actually want to get the 2 points in at it.
The token ends up hanging back. Elvish Mystic attacks Teferi to 4. Yorvo shows up again. We go to Mogelgaard. He's going to draw. Teferi's going to go back to 5, and he will pass. Now, this is where things actually get really scary, because now Mogelgaard can Supreme Verdict at instant speed.
Right. That is the point that really the aggro deck just can't even play around anything anymore, and you're priced into just jamming a lot.
Especially when you have to Collected Company on your own turn. Like, that's the one advantage Werning kind of had in terms of spells.
Right. That was the spot where you could say Mogelgaard has to Verdict, And then on instep, you cast this great spell, get some big creatures, and chunk in for 10.
Team's going to come at Teferi, I imagine. We'll get confirmation on that. All at Teferi. But Castle Ardenvale was land number 5 for Mogelgaard.
What a nightmare.
Shaheen Saran is going to jump in front of Yorvo. The Teferi does go to 3, but sticks around all the same as Blooming Marsh is played by Werning. And see how much he really even wants to commit further. It's really tough. You have to have Supreme Verdict on your mind. But if you're not committing more, you're just not really getting ahead of the castle.
Yeah, and, I've got to be honest, there's a point where if I'm in Werning's position, I might be interested in just jamming and saying, look, I'm not winning if you have Verdict. It's actually just not feasible anymore for that to happen. So I have to live in the world where I can win this game, and if that involves you not having a Supreme Verdict, then I'm not going to pretend you have one.
Luck is what happens when preparation and opportunity meet.
Who said that?
A fortune cookie. Land number 6, plus on Teferi from Mogelgaard. Werning can make another attempt on the Teferi, but at least just Castle Ardenvale gets in front of Yorvos, which we've seen before. Rishkar.
Okay, so this is a window to actually do more and actually force action from Mogelgaard, because now a Castle Ardenvale isn't going to save Teferi.
Yeah, so the Rishkar is going to pump up the token and the Mystic. Yorvo goes to 5 from its own ability. All the creatures are oh no! All the creatures are attacking, and that means that Settle the Wreckage is going to clean house.
I think settle is a good phrase for what's happening right now.
I think Wreckage is a good phrase. 3 creatures exiled. Werning is to go find 3 forests. All right, so good news for Demir Inverter fans. We're going to have the 3 of 4 Inverter top 4 as Julian Henry has defeated Chris Iali. But Shaun Mogelgaard might be the hero we deserve if we're talking about a deck to slay inverters.
Right, he's been doing it all day and making great work of it, navigating those matchups incredibly.
Time Raveler bounces Rishkar. Mogelgaard draws a card. Then we go back to Werning. Now, he has enough lands to just cast a Great Henge at this point.
And if you're in Werning's seat, bounce with Teferi, draw another card for a turn, pass without making a land drop.
Woof. Here's a tap of 4. I think we're going to see that Collected Company now. There it is. Mogelgaard says, okay.
And one of the nice things, if you're in Mogelgaard's seat, about the card Collected Company is unlike something like Spirits, where the creatures kind of have spells attached to them, these are just kind of big dummies. They're just going to attack, and they're not really going to do much on the battlefield until you get a chance to untap and react against them.
Right. Find is Yorvo and Ronas. Yorvo is going to see Ronas and go to 5 right away.
Likely just checking if Yorvo's going to get that second counter. But it checks after the first one.
And here's Rishkar. That's a way to give Yorvo some more counters. It's going to grow naturally. It looks like Werning wants to grow the Rishkar twice. But it's going to put a counter on Rishkar and a counter on Ronas.
See, this is that phase we were talking about before where Werning just isn't going to respect Supreme Verdict anymore. You just have to put cards on the battlefield.
And that's going to be rough as Mogelgaard's casting a Dig Through Time. That's a lot of looks.
Like, the odds aren't great, but if that's your avenue, that's your avenue. You don't really get to choose that.
Right. Ronas gets to stick around anyway. So he has that going for him as well. Mogelgaard's going to grab his 2 cards. We'll head back his way. You see Azorius Charm among the holdings. Ether Gust drawn for turn. Time Raveler goes to 2, and he passes to Werning.
Oof.
Looks like a 6-card grip and no land drop for a couple turns. Can't be thrilled about that if you're Werning.
Oh, geez, are we seeing Mogelgaard pull an LSV where he has the Wrath for mid-combat, but then just shifted the lands over to the Castle Ardenvale?
My favorite part about stories like this is no-selling them, like breaking down the part that I find interesting, and that's that Luis is just like crushing that game anyway. You know? I really like the Nassif Cruel Ultimatum because he sets up to 7 lands when he goes to top deck it, and then he actually draws it, but then taps different lands. And here we see Supreme Verdict from Mogelgaard.
This is at the beginning of combat, I imagine, because that's the way to make sure that Ronus doesn't actually make it to the declare attack step.
Right, make sure that that Ferocious is not online. All right, so just Ronus left behind. Werning, once again, needs to get on the battlefield. Here's a Rishkar. And that'll put a counter on both creatures. Pass the turn, and Ether Gust from Mogelgaard on Rishkar. And that card is really a beating when you're struggling to get on the battlefield.
And this is that situation that we brought up about it not quite being a synergy deck for Werning, but this Ronus just doesn't count as a card. It has not actually gotten to really attack yet.
Mogelgaard's going to put Teferi to 3, plays a Gideon of the Trials, pluses that on the Ronus. And you said Rishkar is not really a card. Werning kept it on top because he just needs things with text, it would seem.
Not Rishkar, Ronus.
Oh, sorry. But the Rishkar does not really feel like a card either.
Well, it's a Centaur Courser several times.
Keeps growing that Ronus that will never deal a point of damage. Teferi to 4, Gideon to 5.
How much work has this Teferi done?
A good amount.
Unbelievable how the kind of impact this card has had on this game.
Well, in particular, when you boil down the deck list and you say that Werning's biggest thing to beat a Supreme Verdict is Collected Company, the inability to cast it at instant speed is so huge.
Right, and we also see a Golgari Charm in Werning's hand.
Not looking great.
Right, that also just takes away the ability for that to interact with a Supreme Verdict.
Rishkar is going to make an attack. Azorius Charm is going to put it back on top. Werning gets to draw that card again. Going for the record of +1/+1 counters on a Ronos that never deals damage. Steel Leaf Champion for Werning. And now the Castle Ardenvale is going to make a token. And we go back to Mogelgaard. Teferi makes the bounce. Get that champion out of there. Gideon's going to keep bubbling the Ronus.
Step 1, untap. Step 2, draw Rishkar.
This is how you take a turn of magic. Steel Leaf Champion shows up again. And here's a Rishkar.
I appreciate Werning. He's being a really good sport about something that is probably pretty aggravating when there's as much on the line as there is in these top 8 matches.
Absolutely.
Great sport about the 5 times he's drawn this Rishkar.
I respect that.
Yeah, me too.
Mogelgaard makes another token. Time Raveler is going to go to 2. Here's a Fabled Passage. And it's Teferi Hero Dominaria for Mogelgaard. It was bad before, it just kind of gets worse all the time.
I like that we've gotten, you can tell Mogelgaard plays on Magic Online because we've got, now that we're at X amount of permanents, we've gotten the triple tier system.
Size of the stacks just keeps changing. Teferi goes to 5, untaps some lands. Back to Shaun Werning. Facing down 3 planeswalkers now, with creatures that attack and block. That is to say, some creatures that attack and block, and one creature that seems to do neither.
So, if Mogelgaard doesn't have anything in hand here, Werning does have the ability to actually pressure some planeswalkers at this point. You can use Golgari Charm to get the 1/1s out of the way. You know, Gideon's only shut off one creature, and Ronus can actually grow the other ones, and there are a lot of lands for growing on Werning's side.
Werning thinking about his options. You know, basically kind of like you've established, he's only beating nothing additional.
Exactly.
So he's thinking how to maximize in the face of nothing. Probably has to get the Hero of Dominaria off the table. Mogelgaard's at 16. I mean, he has a lot of power here. I guess if you're expecting nothing, you could try to shove for a huge amount of damage. What does he have? He has 9 power as a baseline. 3 pumps only gets into 15, so I guess he couldn't shove for lethal, so it would probably be the Hero of Dominaria if you could get anything done this turn.
There's also a point where if you don't have to use your Golgari Charm, attacking the Hero of Dominaria does unlock your insurance against another Supreme Verdict.
So it looks like a bunch of attacks at the Hero, and Ronus at the Time Raveler.
Is it time to draw another Rishkar?
It's time to draw another Steel Leaf Champion, it would seem.
That might be the right play, but it's not the one I wanted to see.
Yeah, it's less thematic.
Exactly.
Chump block on the other creatures. Oh, geez, and Mogelgaard has Gust backup, too. Not that Werning is, like, shy on mana, but he waits for this activation on the Ronas, and that's where he's going to see if he makes a move. Rishka is going to give +2/+0 and trample to Rishkar. Or sorry, Ronus is going to give that. And there's Aether Gust.
Maybe Werning never has to draw this Rishkar again.
Gonna survey his hand, what he thinks about top or bottom, and finally, Rishkar's put to rest at the bottom of the library. Ronus eats a token. Some conversation about that second token, but I believe the creature it was blocking was gone. Not exactly sure what the players are deliberating about here. Mogelgaard was moving the token around. We'll try to get some insights here. All right, well, whatever it was, it's cleared up. Here's an Elvish Mystic for Werning. Mogelgaard's going to fetch up an island. We'll head back his way. 3 planeswalkers still very much intact.
Yeah, and we really are in the territory of this being the nightmare scenario for Werning. It felt like he was really close to being able to mount some sort of attack last turn, but I think things are just going to slip away from here.
End step, Omen of the Sea, keep both for Mogelgaard.
Woof.
And they'll both be entering the hand shortly. Draws one there and draws the other for turn. And Fairy Hero Dominaria, another random card on top of it. Getting the Trials, pluses on Ronus. Time Raveler goes to 3. Gideon ally of Zendikar joins the party. Gideon and Teferi Tribal. Knight ally assembled. Werning is at 20, but that number tells no part of this story. It's really just a matter of Mogelgaard determining when he has enough stuff to start making an attack. As you see Werning draw that Steel Leaf Champion off the top once more, redeploy it. Mogelgaard has an Ether Gust, but it feels like he really has the choice over what he wants to do with that.
Yeah, at this point, there's even a spot where we may just see it saved to use on the Elvish Mystic if it ends up attacking.
Here's a cast out. Goodbye, Ronus. And that Ronus is as ineffective as it had been. It was kind of the best thing Werning had going.
Right, it was just something that couldn't really be answered by conventional means and stood up to a lot of the cards that are normally very strong against Werning.
Well, here's a Reclamation Sage. Ether Gust.
Oh.
He's going to answer that one. Werning will say he either wants to draw it again or he doesn't.
Imagine you have to put it on top. How many of your cards are worth a 2-1 and a 5-5?
And he puts it on top and he concedes. Finally, Shaun Werning has had enough, and I can't blame him. For Shaun Mogelgaard, he got a pretty ideal matchup here, and for Shaun Werning,